I want to welcome everyone to this webinar, Coexisting with Coyotes. Really excited to have our guest speakers and have everybody who's participating in this. I wanted to share a couple of housekeeping tips, but first of all, I'm Lisa Block. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications at Marin Humane. I'm going to be your host for the evening. Hopefully I'll get it right. But a couple quick notes. So this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available after on Marin Humane's YouTube channel, probably not right away, but in the next couple of days. If you'd like to enable closed captions, I see someone already has, that's great. You just use the icon at the bottom of your screen for closed captions. We also have, excuse me, Spanish interpretation available. So if anybody would like to hear this in Spanish, you click the little globe at the bottom of your Zoom screen and you will be taken, and you click for Spanish and you'll be taken to the interpretation. Finally, if you have questions throughout this presentation, and we encourage you to ask questions, we ask that you put them into the Q&A, not into the chat, but into the Q&A. We are going to take questions rather, and answer them after all three presenters have finished. So just know you won't get an answer right away, but we will get to it as much as we can. Going to just quickly outline our agenda. You can see for yourself who our speakers are. I think afterwards they'll share their emails with you. We also have Haley Jones from Department of Fish and Wildlife, who's going to be helping. She's not doing a presentation, but she'll be on with us to answer some questions if they pertain to fish and wildlife. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I am going to turn it over to Carolyn Whitsell. Did I say that right?
Whitesell.
Whitesell, sorry.
No
So
worries.
welcome so much, Carolyn. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much. All right. Hi, everyone. Let me get my slides up. Here we go. So my name is Carolyn Whitesell, and I'm a human wildlife interactions advisor at UC Cooperative Extension, otherwise known as UC Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources. And in my position, I cover the entire Bay Area and help people address any kind of wildlife issues, including coyotes. So today I'm going to be discussing really brief overview of coyote biology within the lens of implications for human-coyote interactions. So coyotes typically weigh between 25 and 35 pounds. We occasionally will get larger ones, but that's the typical size that you're going to be seeing. Now, they can occur either as solitary individuals or live in packs. And this is a common misconception I find where people don't realize that forming packs is actually a completely natural life cycle for coyotes. And then within packs, only the alpha pair is going to be breeding, and the other individuals in the packs will help raise those pups. Now, coyotes are territorial. So once you have a pack established in your neighborhood, they're going to be working to keep other coyotes out. And I want to mention this because keep in mind, if the coyotes you have are not causing any issues, those are the ones you want to stick around, because they're going to be excluding other coyotes that could arrive and could start behaving in a way that we may not want. Now, in the Bay Area, natural enemies are going to be only pumas and people, and really vehicle strikes are going to be one of the largest causes of mortality for coyotes. Now, population size is going to be a reflection of available resources. And what I mean by that is the availability of food, water, and shelter. That's going to be what determines how many coyotes a particular area can sustain. So the more that there is available food, potentially the more coyotes that will occur in a certain region. I also want to mention that coyotes, interestingly, have a really wide array of communication calls. And what's so fascinating about this is that an individual coyote on its own, as it's communicating, can sound to people like many coyotes. That's because there'll be yaps, there'll be howls, there'll be barks, and really interesting undulations and these layered, what we call layered communication, where different sounds on top of each other. And so oftentimes people say, oh my gosh, I must have so many coyotes next door because I'm hearing all these different sounds. And sometimes that's actually just a single coyote. And the communication is going to be really vital for coyotes to not only let other coyotes know about that, hey, they're here, we're here, stay out of my territory. They're going to make different communication calls when they're greeting each other. And also just to let other coyotes know, let other coyotes in the area know about their presence. A common myth that people think is that coyotes make all of these calls at a kill. So they've killed something and they're making all these noises. And that actually isn't true. And that's because coyotes, they don't want to let other competitors know that there's a food source right there. And so that is something that I do want to correct. Now, coyote diet. This is going to be really important to understand because a lot of what the other talks are going to be on tonight is how we can prevent accidentally feeding coyotes. So coyotes really are the ultimate opportunistic omnivore. They're incredibly adaptable. And because they have such a wide diet, they're able to switch between available food sources. And this is how they've been so successful at being able to live in suburban and even urban areas. Now, they primarily feed upon small rodents and mammals. So think rats, right? Bunnies. But they also can feed on fruits. And in California, we're really lucky, right? We can grow a lot of different fruits in our yards, but this also is going to be providing food to coyotes. They like nuts, berries. So think blackberries, all the blackberry vines growing in Marin provide a lot of food for coyotes. They eat birdseed itself, but then also we'll go after all of the rodents that birdseed itself attracts. So when you're putting out a bird feeder, you may not only be feeding the coyotes, but also their prey. They'll eat insects, eggs. So backyard chickens, they're not only going to be able, the coyotes won't only go after the chickens themselves, but also the eggs. They'll go after amphibians, carrion, deer. And I really want to highlight pet food. Pet food has a lot of energy, right? It's energy dense. And coyotes absolutely will eat it. And so that we'll be discussing that later tonight as well, where, if you're going to be feeding pets outside, you really want to bring those bowls in. You don't want to leave extra food out because coyotes will view that as an attractant. Now, cats and small dogs are also viewed as prey items, unfortunately. And this may be one of the largest drivers why we come into conflict with coyotes. Any cat that a coyote encounters, they will view that as a potential prey item. Same with small dogs. So that is just something to be aware of. The specific diet of coyotes, so how much these different prey items are going to be composed within an individual's diet, it really varies by region. And I find it fascinating. So in studies done in Chicago, where there's a really large urban coyote population, they found that cats only made up a very small percentage, about 1% of coyote diets. However, other studies done in California have found a much higher proportion of diet being cats. So actually in Southern California, one study found up to 20% of coyote diet being cats. So we really want to be careful to try to do what we can to keep our cats safe. Now, coyote behavior, they generally are shy around humans, but in some areas, they have lost or are losing their fear of people. And that's really when we start getting conflict, when various organizations that we start getting calls and getting people concerned about having coyotes in their neighborhood. And when coyotes begin associating humans with food, that's when they may start acting aggressively. And while coyote attacks on people are incredibly rare, in the rare instances when it does happen, afterwards, when people have started doing a little bit more research on that individual coyote, what was the situation, what was going on in the neighborhood, inevitably, nearly all of the time, they find out that someone was feeding that coyote. Now, as scientists, we don't understand the exact mechanism, why human food seems to cause the coyotes to start acting more aggressive, but it does seem to be the case. And that's why it's so important that we do our best to not be providing either intentionally or accidentally food to coyotes in our neighborhoods. Now, physical abilities. I often get asked this: can coyotes get into my fenced backyard? Let's say you have a beautiful, brand new 6-foot tall fence. Will that be enough to keep a coyote out? And the answer is no. Coyotes are incredibly athletic. They're able to scale a 6-foot fence, no problem. And I just want to replay this, pause it. So here we see the coyote, how they scale fences as they jump up and then they grab the top of the fence and pull themselves over. And so that's why later when we're talking about some different tools we can have for changing our fence, coyote rollers on the top, when those are mentioned, that's to prevent the coyote from doing this. Now, coyotes can also climb fences as tall as 10 feet, especially if there's mesh or something they can grip to climb. But I really want to drive this point home because it's not enough to just have a fence in your backyard. That's not going to be coyote proof. Coyote reproduction. So right now we're actually in denning season. It's springtime. They are going to breed just once per year, sometime between January and March. The pups are born sometime between March and May. They have a 60-day gestation period. So whenever they've bred, it's going to be 60 days later when the pups will be born within the den. They have an average litter size of 4 to 6 individuals. And the parents may frequently move pups to different dens. And I want to mention this point just because if you do have a den in a particular area, it may not be that long before the coyotes move dens and move somewhere else. So you may just need to have a little bit of patience in how we change our behavior until the coyotes move on. Now, coyotes may defend their den area from perceived threats. And that's why during denning season, we have the most potential for conflict. If you are, have your morning walk, let's say with your dog, and you do the same path every day, but all of a sudden comes springtime, you have a coyote that starts acting aggressive on that typical walk you do every day. That suggests that there's a den nearby. And that's why there's this sudden shift in the coyote behavior. It's because you're getting too close to the den and the coyotes are concerned that you and or your pet are a threat to their pups. And this is where they're going to really try to move you, to a safe, in their mind, a safe distance away from their den. And this is where, the best solution during denning season is simply to avoid that area until the pups have moved on. Escorting behavior is also behavior that often will get misinterpreted. And so what this is that once a coyote, you're a little bit too close to their den, they want to make sure that you're not going to come any closer. They want to make sure you're not a threat. And this is where they can actually follow you a little ways. And we call this escorting behavior because they're escorting you just to make sure that you're leaving. You're creating that safe space between the den and yourself. And people often will get really concerned about this and think the coyote's following me. This is, why is it following me? And it's simply, they just want to make sure that you're leaving. Now in the fall, dispersing individuals, so as the pups are older and they're leaving their parents potentially, if they choose to disperse, those individuals will be looking to establish their own territories. And so this can be another time where there's a little bit higher chances of conflict because we have individuals that are in areas unknown to them. They need to figure out where the best food, water, shelter is. And so you may be having situations where they're a little bit more unsure, a little bit potentially going to come in conflict, trying to find that food source. And if that happens to be on your property, we can have issues arise from that. So setting expectations for having coyotes in your neighborhood. I want to say that once coyotes have arrived in your neighborhood, as long as there is available food, water, and shelter, there's always going to be coyotes. So even if those particular individuals disappear or die, eventually a new coyote or a new pack is going to move in. As I mentioned earlier, they're incredibly resourceful, incredibly adaptable. If they have figured out that a particular area makes a good territory, other coyotes are going to determine the same thing. So if you remove one coyote, keep in mind a new one will move in. And these days, and in California, eliminating all coyotes is not an appropriate nor an effective management goal. Coyotes are native predators to California. They provide lots of ecosystem benefits. And also, coyotes are notoriously hard to remove. So I want to encourage people to not immediately be going to, oh, I have a neighbor or a coyote in my neighborhood, I want it gone. That realistically is not going to happen. The coyote is there to stay. So the onus is on us to try to take action to make them be better neighbors. And that's going to require us to be better neighbors as well to each other. Because really, when we're dealing with coyotes, it's up to all of us to be having similar behaviors, to not have one person that may be providing food, because that's going to have ramifications for everyone living in the area, because the coyotes are going to then be behaving in a way that we don't want them to be. So rather than the absolute number of coyotes, it's really the types of human-coyote interactions that is key. And we want to alter coyote behavior and really prevent those negative interactions from happening. So we never want to reach the point where a coyote becomes habituated to people or is, starting to act aggressive. We really want to prevent that behavior from ever developing. And so the talks following me, I went pretty quickly through my slides, but I wanted to allow lots of time for my fellow panelists to be able to go through what are the steps that we can take to really try to make sure that coyotes stay wild and that we're able to live peacefully with them in our areas. So thank you so much. I'm always happy to talk about any questions you may have about coyotes or really any other wildlife. Shoot me an email anytime. Always happy to help troubleshoot any particular issues you're facing or just general wildlife questions. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Carolyn. Sorry, I was muted. That was really interesting. And it's always, I think, really helpful to get a little bit of the background of coyotes and their behavior and what happens during the different seasons. And I'm glad you mentioned that they are native, because I think that's a question that we've seen a lot. And when a little anecdote that I use is when I went to the La Brea tar pits, they had a big display of all the fossils, and I think it was the second most common or third most common fossil found in California was the coyote. So they have been around. I don't know if it was
Coyotes son nativos de California.
Mario. Oh, could you mute Mario if possible? Sorry, Mario is probably doing some translating for us, which we certainly appreciate. Anyway, let me turn it over to Kelly Hendricks with Project Coyote.
Okay, let me see here. There we go. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining tonight. Let's get started.
Gracias por unirse con nosotros. Comencemos.
For those of you that don't know, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Project Coyote. Can you guys still hear Mario?
Yeah, I'm going to see. Mario, do you think you could mute? Because we're hearing you now. Thank you. It looks like he has. Thank you. Sorry, Kelly.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. No problem. For those of you that don't know about Project Coyote, we're a nationwide nonprofit based in Marin County, California. And our mission is to foster coexistence between people and wildlife using education, science, and advocacy. And although coyotes are our flagship species, we advocate on behalf of all native predators in North America. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about my background, because I think it gives me a unique perspective on these issues of coyotes around livestock and people and pets. And my husband and I are predator-friendly ranchers. We live and work on a ranch where my husband's managed the cow-calf operation for about almost 30 years now. And over those years, we've raised thousands of calves alongside coyotes and mountain lions and other predators without the use of any lethal controls. In addition, I'm a longtime volunteer with Sonoma County Wildlife Rescue, and every year I foster orphaned wild babies to be released back in the wild eventually. Every year, on average, about 50 babies. So that's why this time of year I'm exhausted. And I'm also vice president of Little Trooper Ranch, which is a nonprofit dog rescue. And we specialize in taking in small dogs from bad situations and adopting them into loving homes. And finally, I also serve on the Sonoma County Fish and Wildlife Commission. And the reason I do all this work on a volunteer basis, which is crazy because it's like 60 plus hours a week. But the reason I do all this work as a volunteer is because I truly believe that as humans, we have an obligation to be good stewards of our pets and livestock, but also of the wildlife that lives amongst us. So let's talk about risk assessment, because that's an important issue. As humans, we tend to be really bad at it. And we tend to worry about things like shark attacks and, mountain lions attacking us, and not worry as much about things like heart disease and cancer, the things that are actually going to kill us. And the statistics kind of back this up. I mean, we're not afraid of dogs, and dogs aren't generally even dangerous, even in comparison to other dangers. But dogs do bite 4.5 million people a year in the United States, and average about 35 deaths per year. And a lot of those are small kids. And we don't think of dogs as dangerous, and they're really not, but you can see that it's compared to coyotes, they're significantly more dangerous than coyotes, who on average bite and scratch about 24 people a year in all of North America. And most of those incidents are very superficial. Cars kill about 6 million pets a year, and domestic dog attacks are a leading cause of vet hospital intakes of our pets. So the facts show that our pets are much more likely to be hurt or injured or killed by other domestic dogs, and as are we. So coyotes are, anything can be dangerous, right? But in the overall picture, coyotes are one of the least dangerous things you'll ever come across. So a good way to keep something like coyotes even less of a threat to our pets and ourselves is to do something called hazing, which just means scaring them. Because the important thing to bear in mind is in urban areas, coyotes have to be a little habituated to humans in order to survive. In rural areas like the ranch we live on, coyotes see a person and they're gone. They're out of there. But in urban areas, if they were to act that way around every person they saw, they wouldn't be able to survive. It wouldn't be sustainable. So they have to get someone somewhat desensitized to people and our noises and cars and things like that. That doesn't necessarily mean they're aggressive, but what we want to do is keep that from escalating to aggression. So we want to keep them, although they don't have to be as reactive as they are in rural areas, we do want to make sure they don't get too bold. So hazing just means scaring them. And when do you do that? When a coyote approaches you, your pet, your home, or your yard. And how do you do that? You just do it by acting big, bad, and loud. That means yelling at them, raising your arms, slapping your leg, making eye contact with that coyote and let them know that you're targeting him, and yelling at them. David, who's going to talk after me, mentioned this idea, which I thought was great, about carrying a plastic bag in your pocket, which you can throw it up like a trash bag, catch it there, move it around. That'll scare them, make some noise with it. We even have these noise makers that you can wear on a lanyard around your neck. They're super light. You can get them on Amazon. They're for sporting events. You go to sporting events, you want to root on your team. They're very loud, so prepare yourself. They're super loud. It can scare a coyote off, and actually come in handy for if you need help for other reasons. So you just want to act big, bad, and loud. You don't have to be big, bad, and loud. It's just an acting job. And what's going to happen is usually a coyote will run off a little ways, turn around and look at you to make sure that you really mean business. And that's when it's super important. A lot of times people just go, I tried to haze, but it didn't work. That's because they gave up at this part. This part's where you have to continue on, maybe even get more aggressive until they leave the area. Because that almost always happens. You don't want to haze if a coyote may be protecting pups. That means sometimes during spring, In early summer, if you see a coyote acting kind of unusually, standing its ground, seeming maybe a little aggressive, the best thing to do is just get your dog on a leash, pick up a small dog, and slowly walk out of the area. Don't haze if coyotes are just being coyotes. If they're staying a respectful distance away and just hunting in a field, don't haze them. If they are sick or injured, don't haze either. So avoiding conflicts on walks. The number one way to avoid conflicts is leashes. Coyotes rarely attack a pet on a leash, so it's a great idea to use leashes. I know a lot of times people want to let their dogs run free, but when you do that, that comes with dangers. They can get hit by cars, they can be attacked by wildlife, but more often what happens is they attack wildlife. This time of year in Wildlife Rescue Hospital, we get multiple cases a week of wild babies attacked by dogs and cats. So it's very sad, but also you don't want your dog to get skunked. You don't want a doe to attack your dog, protecting a fawn. You don't want a coyote to attack your dog. So keep them on leashes. You can let them off leashes in dog parks, places where there's not a lot of wild spaces or places for animals to hide. But we really encourage you to keep them on leashes. They're just happy to be with you. They don't need to run wild. So carry a deterrent. That means something like what I spoke about this. They make something called storm whistles, which are whistles you can buy on Amazon. They're made to work in high winds and rain. And think of your pets as toddlers. We always like to refer to our pets as our kids. So we encourage people to think of them as toddlers. You wouldn't let your kid in your yard playing unsupervised. You wouldn't let them on a walk just venture far from you. You want them, keep them right there next to you as if they were a toddler. Haze if necessary, and you can use something like light up collars and bells. Coyotes are neophobic, meaning they're scared of new things in their environment. So if they see a dog that's lighting up and jingling, they're probably going to leave that dog alone. And the light up collars and leashes are also great to prevent car strikes. And if you see in that picture on the lower left of the Chihuahua, what you probably may have seen these things called coyote vest. It's overkill probably, but it could also be effective against dog attacks. I don't know. I've never heard anybody say that they've ever had a dog attacked wearing one or if it was effective. So as far as I know, they're 100% effective because I've never heard of a dog being attacked by one while wearing one, but who knows? Couldn't hurt. I guess we could say that. So protecting yards. The number one thing, Caroline spoke a little bit about this, is removing attractants. That means picking up fallen fruit from fruit trees if you have them in your yard, picking up seeds from under bird feeders if they're in your yard, and bringing in pet food, not leaving it out at night. Putting in coyote rollers on the top of the fence. Caroline showed how coyotes jump a fence and most wildlife jump the same way. That means even though to your naked eye, sometimes it looks like they just jump over in one fell swoop, usually animals will touch it with their paws. And these roll bars will just make them fall over. And they're also, coyote rollers are also awesome at keeping pets inside of yards. So, which is another bonus. If you have a pet that's an escape artist, the coyote roller could be a good option for you. They even work with cats. So Dig Defense is another great product, and that's you can see on the lower right hand part of my screen. It's just sections of galvanized steel rods that you can hammer in the ground on the bottom of your fence line to prevent digging under. And that's another great product. Catios, which is just predator-proof enclosure, so your cat can have outdoor access safely, and they can be as modest as like this one in the picture I show, or as deluxe as you want. So that's a great option too. And again, to protect your yard, you can haze coyotes if you see them around your yard if necessary. So I'm going to finish up with this short video showing how those roller bars work. This one is a different brand. It's not Coyote rollers. I think this one's from New Zealand or something, but it works the same exact way. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Kelly. That was great. Really, really helpful. I have a big catio at my house, which I love. I have 2 cats and they can go outside and feel the sunshine and be protected, which I really love. I kind of feel like it's the best of both worlds. So
I've seen amazing ones that are nicer than the house I live in. So
oh yeah, I mean,
it's a
people
great
you
option.
can get really, really creative, and I think, you know, a
Yeah.
lot of us maybe we grew up letting our cats out, but it's really, you know, it's at Marin Humane. That's a really important thing for us is trying to encourage people to keep cats in and do things like catios for enrichment and lots of fun toys inside because they are at such risk for coyotes, but also cars, disease, things like that. So that's a little Marin Humane
Yeah,
PSA
sure.
there. So Kelly, if you want to stop sharing your screen. I'm going to introduce our next guest. He's from Marin Humane, and that's Dave Stapp. He's our field services supervisor, and he's going to chat for a few minutes. How
do I stop sharing? Do I just hit stop video or does that stop my?
If you know, you want to, I think, go to the top, towards the top, there should be a stop share.
Stop video. Let's see.
I think stop video is going to.
I know, that's what I'm afraid of too. There's something that says news share. Let me see. I'm so paranoid of hitting. You know what I mean? Like I'm paranoid. I'm thinking, I know if I hit stop video, that's gonna just take my face off, which is fine, but I don't think it's gonna accomplish. And if I hit the red, that's gonna close out the whole thing, right?
Yeah, and that's okay. Yeah. As long as you don't, we don't want you to leave though. We want you, Kelly. So don't.
There we go. That's right. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, stop share. Now I see it.
Stop share.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. Great. Okay. And so now we'll welcome Dave Stapp. I think you're muted still.
Yep, there you go. Hi, my name's Dave Stapp. I'm the field service supervisor at Marin Humane. Excuse me, I'm actually getting over a little bit of a cough, so if I cough, I'm sorry. Basically, I just want to talk real quick about what Marin Humane, what our role is in the county for mainly public safety. Let me move my bar all the way here. Marin Humane's role basically is to provide ensure public safety. Animal Services provides animal services or animal control for all the cities in the county of Marin. Our job is to ensure the welfare of animals, including wildlife, and we do that by coordinating resources and networking with other agencies such as Project Coyote, Fish and Wildlife, and Marin County Parks. So brief history. I mean, we've had coyotes in the county. I've been here for about 26 years now. When I first moved, we didn't have that many coyotes. It seems that we have more and more. So over a period of time, they have increased. We hear them all the time. Back in 2004, we actually passed a wildlife feeding ban in Marin County to help solve the problem of feeding. Some of the most concerns that we receive from the public when we are that our officers respond on is mainly that coyotes are roaming in neighborhoods. People think that coyotes are stalking them. They're in their backyards. Coyotes, they want to know if coyotes are going to attack their family members or their pets. They call us whenever they see a pack of coyotes, or if a coyote looks sick, or maybe rabbit. These are some of the calls that we get overall. We do respond to coyote calls. When we respond, our main goal is educate, and then we'll educate some more about coexistence with coyotes. And so we'll try to reduce public fear and build awareness that we do have coyotes in the county. We try to encourage responsible land stewardship, basically just to coexist with the coyotes and the natural animals that we have here in the county. We very on top of our list is encourage people from keeping their pets safe and supervised. If it sounds like we're repeating a topic, I apologize for that, but pet safety and supervision is a big thing when it comes to coyotes. We respond to potential public threat. So if people believe that they're being threatened, our officers will respond to calls like that. And we try to teach people how to basically not defend themselves, but how to haze coyotes. We also respond if we see, if someone reports that they're sighting a den, a possible den, or pups that are out running free without a parent. Coyote predators on pets. If a pet gets attacked, we respond to those. Always respond to coyotes that are on school ground while children are out. Or if a coyote is new to a neighborhood, we pretty much know where the coyotes are, what their major path are, but they do span out and go to different areas. Aggressive coyote encounters, and those are some of the calls that we will go on. One of the main problems that we have is the feeding of coyotes, either on purpose or by accident. We do in the past have had people that have gone to the store or to Jack in the Box fast food and bought bags of food just to go out and feed the coyotes. And feed the coyotes just to watch them and take pictures of them. We do put signage out in areas that they're not supposed to be feeding. What I say by accidental feeding is people that leave their pet food out at nighttime, or a yard that has fruit, bird seed. We talked about that earlier. Bird feeders are a problem because the bird feeders will come in and they bring the animals that coyotes like to eat. So feeding wildlife is illegal in Marin and also in California. We do send officers out to investigate if we get complaints of people feeding coyotes. We prefer to educate the offenders and not really cite them firsthand unless it's an ongoing event and we cannot educate them enough. So it could eventually lead into a citation. Some of the stuff that we do to educate is, as we spoke to before, is about hazing. Great Kelly being loud and obnoxious. That's exactly what you want to be. You want to be loud, obnoxious as possible. If they don't get it, be more louder and even more obnoxious. Alter your techniques. Don't try the same techniques over and over and over. Try different things to scare the coyotes off. And basically, we want them to understand that we are human. They can be here with us, but they need to stay their distance. And this is what the whole point is of hazing. We encourage all our neighbors to participate. So not just you, if you have a neighbor that doesn't want to do it, or if you have a neighbor that feeds them, we want to make sure that everybody's participating the same, because the more we haze, the less we're going to see the coyotes getting too close to us. Smart hazing. It's so stop and stand your ground. Make yourself as big as possible. Announce yourself as strong in a forceful voice. Repeat and reinforce if necessary. Teach your neighbors and your friends how to haze coyotes. Some of the common hazing tools, we talked about this earlier. Shaker cans. Basically, it's a soup can that had the lid off. With probably about some coins in there that you can shake. You don't want to hit coyotes with stuff. You want to toss things at them, but not necessarily hit them. I'm actually really good with a tennis ball chucker. With the tennis ball, I can get pretty close to a coyote, a lot closer than I can if I'm throwing it with my arm. We talked about the air horns. Kelly did a sample of one. Whistles, great water guns, super soakers are good. Garden hoses, drum noises, There are pepper spray and halt, but you want to be very careful with that, because if you spray OC, it's going to go everywhere, especially on yourself, and it really has no effect on canines or coyotes. So we try to just try to say don't use that. When not to haze a coyote, we talked about this a little bit briefer. When they're behaving normally in an appropriate area, you don't want to haze them. If you're out on a hiking trail up in the headlands and you see a coyote, you don't need to haze them. Just go your separate ways. If they appear sick or injured, you don't want to haze them. You want to report them so we can go out and see if they need help. You don't want to haze them if they're cornered or if they have no escape route, because they are wild animals, and if they can't get away from you, it's fight or flight. So you don't want to haze them into a corner. You don't want to haze them near their den site. We talked about that earlier, or if they have pups. So just be around. We are in, I forgot what season, we're denning season, so we're coming up. So helpful community hazing. Have a neighborhood coordinator. Talk with your neighbors to see if you have coyotes and see who is hazing them. Talk to people who have dogs. Make sure they're being cautious around their area. Their dogs are on leash, not running free in open space areas. We talk about photographers. A lot of photographers want to try to bait them so they can take pictures. We don't like that. That's not a good thing. Coyotes are very intuitive, and they like to explore and examine something. So if something's new to them, they're going to be curious about it. And also around tourist areas, because they realize tourists drop food and they take a lot of pictures. So we want to make sure that we're not doing any of that. Let's see. Keeping pets safe. Safe confinement is urged. We talked about the catteries, the fence rollers. Those are all great tools. The best thing to do is make sure that your dog and cat are on leads. Coyotes they will approach, but they usually don't want to approach a dog. Pick up your dog, make yourself as big as possible. Just don't send your dog or small animal out after the coyotes. And we talk about leaving your cats indoors. Indoor cats are the best. Okay, outdoor cats unfortunately do become food. So keeping your pet safe, not just from coyotes. There's a number of dangerous things out there in the world that your cat or loose dogs can get into. They're getting hit by a car. They can be injured in dog fights, or for your cats, they can be caught by dogs. They have parasites, poisons, cruelty by other not so nice people. They can get lost or stolen. They're out in the weather. They get diseases. It's best just to keep your pet indoor and safe and with you. We talked about being a toddler. Treat your pet like a toddler. Keep them safe and keep them away from the outdoor or the coyotes. We do work with our feral cat colonies keepers in here, Marin, Friend, and Feral, and mainly so to make sure that they're not overfeeding the feral cats, and they're only putting out enough food for the cats to eat during a short period of time, and then picking up afterwards. And that's all I have, Lisa.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. And we also have Nancy McKenney, who's the CEO of Marin Humane, has joined us. And I don't know, Nancy, if you want to add anything else to what Dave said from our point of view.
Well, I guess, so far everyone's probably heard a lot of information, a lot of techniques, and a lot of tools shared. And we just want to say that Marin Humane wants to be a resource for people. So if this is something that you have any questions or concerns about coyotes or the things that we've talked about, still call us. Like Dave said, we aren't necessarily going to send an officer out right away, or don't be surprised if we also start talking about hazing techniques or some of the tools. But again, if after tonight you still have more questions or concerns, or you're not sure, you should report something to us. Don't hesitate to call. And then all of the speakers tonight have great information on their web pages. And as Lisa said, this will be a recording that we'll put on the YouTube channel so that you can always start and stop and let us know if there's even more information that you want. But Marin Humane is concerned, but also is definitely supportive of learning how to live and appreciate what coyotes do in our community. And we're trying to give the community all these different avenues and information to make you feel like you can appreciate and live well with them.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you so much. So as I mentioned earlier, we're happy to take questions. In addition to the panelists you heard from, we also have a representative from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, Haley Jones, who can answer some questions. And please put them in the Q&A that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. Hi, Haley. And with that, I'm going to take the first question because I think Haley is going to address that. And the question was, how many coyotes are killed by wildlife services a year in California or Fish and Wildlife?
Yeah, so I can only speak for Region 3, which is made up of 13 counties in the Bay Area and Delta region. And I also can't specifically speak for wildlife services, but I can talk about how we work with them. So to my knowledge, I've been in this position since August of last year. I have not heard of any coyotes being removed by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And when a coyote would need to be removed due to public safety concern, wildlife services would need confirmation from us to then go out and remove it.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. Someone said last year we had over 7 coyotes in Spinnaker Point. This year we have no sightings and no scat. Is it possible they are gone? So I'm not sure. I don't know if that's a Carolyn question or what do you, who wants to take that? Sure.
I can jump in on that. Yeah, so that absolutely is possible. I should have mentioned when we're talking about territory size, I mean, there's a huge range of sizes of territories, and especially in more suburban or urban settings, if there's a lot of available food, the territories can be much smaller, but it's quite variable. So in that situation, it could be that the coyotes you'd been seeing, were hit by a car, or some other source of mortality, or they simply moved on because they found better resources available elsewhere. Or they could be coming back, right? They could be just shifting, using a different part of their territory if they happen to have a very large one. Although in San Rafael, there are a lot of resources. So I would say it's probably more likely that either they're dead or they just moved somewhere else. And that's, again, why we harp so much on removing attractants, because coyotes, if they, realize there's not food left in a particular area, they're going to move on and go somewhere else. And because they have such a wide diet, they can very easily switch to a different food source. And so that's why we really want to make it so that our particular homes aren't appealing. They can go somewhere else, hopefully a more natural setting. When I think of San Rafael, think of like China Camp, right? There are a lot of open spaces that can provide plenty of available resources for coyotes, and we want to encourage the coyotes to stay there versus moving fully into our neighborhoods.
Thank you,
I think another important thing to consider is that the amount of coyote sightings you have or the number of coyotes you see together can change based on the time of year. So if you're seeing a lot, like 7 coyotes together commonly in fall, that's to be expected, because that's when the pack sizes are at their biggest. It's right before we consider the dispersal season, when a lot of the pups leave their established packs to find territories of their own. And certain times of year into winter, there might just be the resident coyote pair, and they are probably usually a lot less visible than the pups might be. So it would probably be more unusual certain types of year to see a lot of coyotes together.
Thank you. So, and maybe the Spinnaker Point neighbors did a great job learning to coexist and hazing, and they got the coyotes to move on to more appropriate space. Someone commented that they lost a cat to coyotes, and we're always really sorry to hear that. But they put in a beautiful catio for their cats. And she wrote she loves it and loves the wild coyotes. So that's awesome. We're really glad to hear
Yay.
it. Really, really awesome. The next person had asked, this was addressed to Carolyn. Is there any way to encourage coyotes to prey on our ground squirrels? The coyotes are underperforming and the squirrel population is exploding. Second generation rodenticides may be part of the problem.
Yeah, so California ground squirrels, I field a lot of calls about them because they can cause extensive damage themselves. So yes, coyotes absolutely will feed on them. Unfortunately, you know, as far as scientific community is aware at this time, there aren't specific ways that you can be encouraging coyotes to feed more upon California ground squirrels. When we think of encouraging predators for ground squirrels, we typically think raptors and installing raptor perches. But that being said, you know, for predators to have to be feeding upon enough ground squirrels to actually be suppressing population, we don't really find that typically happening. But that is an avenue of ongoing research, is how can we try to, you know, increase the density of raptors to then potentially be feeding up enough to suppress the population. But a lot of individuals need to be removed to actually cause a population decline for ground squirrels. And once the squirrels get harder to catch, the coyotes are going to switch to something easier. And so that's why it's difficult to be able to rely on a species like coyotes to really suppress a ground squirrel population. But that being said, they certainly help. And that's why, you know, one of the ecosystem benefits that coyotes can provide is going after rodents, including ground squirrels and rats, you know, which we don't want a lot of rats, you know, in our neighborhoods either. So they are, you know, able to help at least keep the population from exploding.
Can I just say something in support of ground squirrels? Because I rehab a lot of them, and like every animal, like every native animal in North America and California, ground squirrel in California, is they really serve an important role that is underappreciated. The first being is that they're the primary food source of golden eagles in California. So we want ground squirrels around. They're really, really super important. Also, they help aerate the soils. Their digging help aerate our soils. Like in our pastures here on the ranch, I release a lot of rehabbed ground squirrels here when I can, because they keep our pastures healthier. They keep them more drought resistant. They germinate seeds better. They just keep the overall pastures healthier. And it's not well understood by people, this part of ground squirrels. They see them, they see the holes, and they think damage, but it's actually beneficial. And when people think that their populations are exploding, it's another species that oftentimes in winter will be almost dormant. And in temperate climates like here, they don't go technically hibernate, but they're way less active in winter. And in this part of California, you may not see them. Then all of a sudden spring comes, and them and their babies are popping up, and you think, oh my God, there's so many ground squirrels, they're overpopulated, but they will soon be eaten. Raptors come, bobcats, coyotes, as long as we're not using poison on them, they're really a great benefit to the ecosystems. That's my spiel on ground. That's my pro ground squirrel spiel there.
I like it. Thank you. That's really interesting and important points to remember. I mean, it's all interconnected, right? That our ecosystem, that's what this is all about. So someone wrote, very good presentation. I tell people here in Morgan Hill, it's nice to have someone from Morgan Hill, to also not leave their dogs out at nighttime, to bring them indoors. We have coyotes and mountain lions in the hills in my neighborhood. Yeah, absolutely. I think we would all agree that dogs should be brought inside at night. We would hope cats can come in too, but we're working on that. So thank you for that. Someone asked if there are statistics about rodenticide deaths. I don't know if they meant rodenticide deaths among coyotes. I would imagine that's what the question was. And I don't know if anybody here has that information.
I don't have full statistics, from the state or even at the county level. I do know, well, certainly studies have shown that, a vast majority, at least mountain lions, it's over 90% of tested mountain lions, they are able to find residual rodenticides in their system. And I would guess that coyotes would be similar, or at least, a majority of them, but I don't have the exact number for how many when they, you have a coyote mortality, and if it's tested, how many are come back positive for rodenticides. I do know of an instance, gosh, within the last 18 months down in Santa Clara County, where a coyote died from overdose of rodenticide. I believe it was difascinone. Haley, you may have more information on that. So it certainly can happen. And that was certainly an instance where, someone was mishandling the rodenticide and allowing it to be, accessible to wildlife, which is very concerning. And the coyote, because of the high levels of rodenticide that they found in that carcass, the coyote was clearly eating it itself. It wasn't, second generation. It wasn't that it was eating a lot of rodents that had accessed the rodenticide. To achieve that level in its system, it must have gone into the rodenticide itself. So someone left it out. So I don't know general, but it can happen. And that's really why I encourage people to, if you do choose to use rodenticides, follow the label, be cautious, minimize the use of them, try to use other tools first, and certainly secure them so that they're not accessible to other species.
Yeah, the questioner followed up. She was referring to coyotes, and she wrote that we lose a lot of mountain lions to traffic and rodenticides here in Santa Cruz. I know Marin Humane's point of view, we would encourage people to never use them. And in fact, pretty sure in Marin County, you cannot use them for residential use at all. It's only for commercial. And we hope that when legislation comes up, there'll be some stricter guidelines on it, because it is really insidious, as we all know, and it's a horrible death for the animals that ingest it.
I'd like to add
Sure.
that our wildlife health lab can test a lot of carcasses. So the public can reach out to CDFW pretty much like anyway, but mainly we have a mortality report on our website. If you literally Google CDFW mortality report, you can submit photos, a description of it. And then we have at least 3 veterinarians on staff that will evaluate it and then pretty much send me or anybody else to go collect the carcass to then bring it for testing. So I can't speak to the statistics. I could probably go and get that information and then try and provide it to some of these speakers to then distribute out to this community. But there's definitely interest in looking at rodenticide deaths. I almost got called out last weekend to get a supposed coyote that was maybe suspected of that. Turns out wasn't even a coyote, but we definitely track that and have a lot of interest in that. And then if anybody also is concerned about anonymously reporting it, you can also report it to our CalTIP hotline. That'll go to our law enforcement. It's all anonymous. And then it can either be then sent out to me to follow up on, or they can follow it up on it themselves, depending on the situation.
Great. Thank you. That's really good to know. So someone had a question, or it looks like some comments for you, Haley. She wrote, I'm very concerned about wildlife services and California Fish and Wildlife killing wildlife, especially carnivores, when the vast majority of Californians don't want carnivores killed, and especially by these entities. Why aren't wildlife services and Fish and Wildlife putting money and time into non-lethal coexistence methods? We resent our wildlife being killed when these non-lethal methods are highly efficacious, cost-effective, and fitting with Californians' preferences.
Yeah, so we absolutely are putting money into it. That's what my sole position is a human wildlife conflict specialist. I believe there are about 20 of us across the state who have this position specifically to deal with these things. In California, we have a mountain lion policy where if they take livestock, they first have to get a non-lethal depredation permit, and we go out, confirm that a lion is responsible, required deterrence they have to put in. And then if a lion comes back again, in a lot of the areas, we'll go out again, confirm, provide even more strict deterrence. And then if a mountain lion comes back a 3rd time, then we might consider a lethal permit. It's similar with bears. Coyotes are allowed to be taken at any time of the year with a hunting license, but that's significantly limited by where you can discharge a firearm per hunting regulations, like 150 yards from a structure and stuff. So I think, you know, there's an old assumption of how Fish and Wildlife maybe used to be managed, but it's changed significantly. We're pro carnivore, but also want to make sure that we work collectively with our livestock producers so that they're also informed and encouraged as well, because, you know, you can't bring a sheep or a goat in your house like you can bring a cat or a dog. But we also, this is a good little sound pitch for our wildlife incident reporting system. So if you also just Google CDFW wildlife incident report, you can report anything from a raccoon acting weird to wanting to learn more about squirrels to a mountain lion came and ate 5 of my sheep. And that's immediately routed to either a unit biologist or a conflict specialist. And we follow up with that person to provide them with the whole array of deterrents, a lot of which were discussed in this talk for coyotes, which apply to other predators. And we will go out and do site visits even after the point where they can no longer get a permit. Today, I went out with some woman who lost 2 sheep 2 weeks ago, so there's no way she would even get a non-lethal hazing permit, but it was clear that she would benefit from someone coming out, showing her how she can better protect and manage her livestock. And so there's definitely a lot of resources. I think people maybe just don't know where to go to because there's a lot of like dead phone numbers from COVID with the department. So I think the best way to connect with us, and we're happy to talk about anything, I give my phone number out all the time, is the wildlife incident reporting system on our website. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, that's great to know. Thank you so much. Oh, you'll like this. This one's for you, Kelly. Someone said, Jerry said, I did a research project in South Dakota for my biology class, and the ground squirrels definitely help aerate the soil and assist in building aquifers.
Yay,
So,
yeah.
Wow. Okay. Another one
Love
for team ground squirrel. Let's see. Someone says, thank you for more great information that I can add to my daily visit on Nextdoor. You're a brave soul for going on Nextdoor every day. I need to watch myself. Offering facts and suggestions to those concerned about coyotes. Happy that the majority of people are now respectful of our wildlife, but there is still too much myth, I would agree, and too many pets impacted by a lack of implementation of effective methods to achieve coexistence. I think we all completely agree, and that's why we're very grateful that people are participating with us in these conversations, because everyone who's learning this information will hopefully go and tell neighbors and friends and post about it on Nextdoor. So exactly right. So we can dispel some of these myths. Let's see. I think, let's see, sorry, someone is asking if we can clarify the difference between CDFW and wildlife services.
Yeah, so the California Department of Fish and Wildlife manages the species located in California. We are tasked with running like population estimates, density estimates, and like hunting regulations, all that. We collaborate with the USDA. It's under the Department of Agriculture, so they will do a lot of like wildlife removal relative to like not destruction, but like them taking cows. But the thing is CDFW is the state of California, USDA is the entire country. So I would imagine the majority of those numbers might be coming from like the plains, where there's a lot more cattle and a lot more livestock that are way out in the open. So yeah, those numbers are definitely not solely California. And especially those are limited, I would imagine, I don't know for sure, but I would imagine those are limited to large agricultural areas and absolutely not like cities. And again, places that cannot allow or do not allow the discharge of a firearm.
Okay. Looks like one more question here, or well, let's see, a couple more. A nice comment. Wonderful to hear that CDFW is changing and being much more comprehensive and understanding of the predators, and that non-lethal is step one. So I think that's we all kind of feel that way. Oh, someone asked if we can do a similar tutorial on foxes. Saw a helpful post on Nextdoor, but would be great to have more information there. Beautiful animals. I agree. So I don't know, gang, maybe we'll talk later about foxes, because they definitely are certainly a part of the ecosystem, and we see them in Marin quite a bit. And I think, Nancy, you had something you wanted to add? Nancy McKenney with Marin Humane.
Oh, I was just going to ask the panel if they want, we've had comments about aggressive coyotes and what does that really mean? And another comment was somebody was trying to haze a coyote and then thought that they were being taunting by they started to run away down the path and then turned and looked at the person doing the hazing. Is that a communication or a perception that they're taunting the person doing the hazing? Are they just trying to be looking cool and try to tell you that they didn't really get it? So anything about the coyote behavior when they turn and look back? Should we be scared, nervous? What does that mean?
As I mentioned in my portion of the presentation, that's a common, they almost do it every time you haze them. It's just their natural behavior is they'll run off a bit, turn around and look at, and they kind of, it's just their way of evaluating the danger if one exists. Like a couple of months ago, I was riding with my niece out in the pastures through our cows, and we saw a coyote run. I'm like, look, there's a coyote running in the hills. And the coyote's running in the hills. And then all of a sudden behind it, the cows come up over the hills and they're chasing the coyote. It's pretty funny, but that we have mother cows that are very protective, and they're chasing the coyote, and the coyote's just running. And every now and then he'd just stop and turn around and see if they're still following him and keep running. So it's just what they naturally do when they think that they may be under threat, it's just a way of them evaluating the possible threat and how serious it is or isn't, which is why we encourage, that's the most important part of hazing, is the follow through, meaning when that happens, you have to amplify your hazing technique till the coyote goes, oh, she is targeting me, or he or she is targeting me, and they're serious, and then they'll leave.
Okay.
Makes perfect sense. Now.
Yeah. And someone asked if we could talk a little bit more about the howls of coyotes and the differences between different kinds of howls. And I think this is a good question, because I often see on my Nextdoor, someone says, oh my God, there was this huge pack and they were howling over a kill and it was right outside my window. And it's people are, understandably very scared and freaked out. So I don't know if someone, maybe Carolyn, you want to talk a little bit about vocalization of coyotes, or whoever is best for this.
Yeah, I was just trying to pull up a maybe YouTube video to show it. I recommend you go to YouTube and just search for coyotes howling, because it's really fascinating. In the future, I can add it to my talk just to hear the variety of calls. And oftentimes you wouldn't even, if you hadn't heard it before and someone played it for you, you might not think it's coyote. It's unique. It's very high pitched, but undulating, and lots of very differing calls. And so that's, a common misconception where it's like, oh my gosh, there must be so many, and there may only be one, maybe a few. But, like all other forms of communication, they're just trying to have a conversation with each other. So either letting other pack members know, like, hey, I'm back, and greeting each other. So excited calls, or, to let other packs in the area know, like, hey, this is my territory. I want you to know that I'm here. So you shouldn't try to encroach on my territory. Just in general, people theorize that by doing the calls, they're actually alerting other coyotes in the region to be able to estimate how many coyotes there are in the area, so that as dispersing individuals are, going through a new area, they can go, oh, hey, there are a lot of coyotes around here. I think I'm going to keep going instead of trying to stop and establish a territory here. And I'm sure there's a lot more conversations going on that researchers have yet to discover that's able to be communicated through the calls. But I know there are coyotes in my neighborhood, and I always enjoy hearing them in the middle of the night, though they are very loud. So I will say that sometimes you do have to put some earplugs in, but just try to enjoy it. And it's just them having a conversation.
Yeah, and I think, and I'm glad that you mentioned those YouTube videos, because it is really interesting. In fact, even one coyote sounds almost like their voice is like layered. They're doing a high pitch and a low pitch almost at the same time, so it sounds like more than one. Do they? I'm curious. Do they actually vocalize over a kill? Do they like say like, "Hey guys, we got a good kill over here"? They don't do that.
So they're going to make a kill and then try to eat it.
Right. That's what I would think.
Yeah, because evolutionarily, they're not going to want, coyotes they're not the top.
They're not going to share. Okay,
Pumas,
right.
gray wolves are going to go after them. So they're not going to want to let everyone know that they're eating because, in let's say other areas where there are gray wolves, so, far Northern California, the gray wolves are going to hear that and go like, hey, free meal. I can easily chase these coyotes off that carcass. So they're going to focus on just eating and then, potentially communicating afterwards. But right, that is a very common myth that they're being like, hey, there's a kill, and that's not what's going on. So you don't have to be concerned. But also, I always tell people, like, if they have made a deer kill, that's great because that is natural food. We want them to be going after wild prey items.
Right. Kelly, did you have something to add to that?
I was going to say, you can see where people would think that they killed something because, and Caroline will back this up. This is why I agree that you should Google their vocalizations, because it can sound bizarrely like something is being, like a cat's being skinned or something with some of their vocalizations. And if you didn't see their vocalizations, see their behaviors while they're making the vocalizations, it would be easy to believe that they are in the process of killing something based on those vocalizations, but they absolutely not. So it is a good idea to Google it, because you won't believe it till you see it. And you'll be like, oh gosh, I could have sworn they were killing something when I heard that.
Right. Yes. I've read on Nextdoor people saying, there was murder outside my window.
Right.
And so, well, that's really interesting. They are pretty amazing animals in terms of their intelligence. And I've appreciated learning more about them since I've started working with Marin Humane. Well, it looks like I don't see any more questions in the Q&A. Does any of our panelists, any last words of advice that you'd like to impart to us? I think that, people, as Nancy said, can always get in touch with Marin Humane, or I'm sure, Project Coyote or anybody here. I think we want to help. And, I think coexistence means all of us too, right? All of our organizations, all of us as individuals, all the different animals, we're all here together. So anything?
I have another deterrent that I've been recommending to people.
Yes.
There are these self-defense alarm keychains that are super easy to carry, and they're for like people walking home alone, and maybe a little bit more handy than a thing of coins or rocks in a tin. And what I really like about it is you can unclip it and then you can actually throw it at the animal. Now, hopefully you can find it, because then it's going to keep going off. And a lot of them have lights. But that's really handy. One common
it's called a self-defense alarm. Is that what you said?
Keychain.
Keychain.
Yeah, like a common brand I've heard of is Birdie, spelled like what's in golf. But there's a lot of different options. But I like to tell people, like, you can carry it. Your preteens, teens can carry, and it's good for all wildlife and people. Like universe, it works.
Human predators.
There's a toy. There's a thing like that. It's called a screamer, that you can pull the thing out, and it makes the highest pitched sounds. Years ago, it was a deterrent that if you were being attacked, people would use it as self-defense to draw attention to themselves. I understand what Haley's talking about. It is very loud.
Yeah. And then one other thing I always talk about when I talk to people about coyotes, because I talk to them a lot, is that if you think about it from a coyote's perspective, like the number of times these coyotes have been looked at by someone, or they step out on their porch and they say, go away, coyote, and they clap twice and they go inside, or they do, all those small interactions that aren't aggressive and haze worthy of the term, habituate that animal that, like, oh, the person's not going to go bite and scratch me like a wild animal would. And so that's why we're seeing these coyotes coming closer, being on our porches, or just looking at you after running 10 feet, which is why everyone needs to just step up that aspect of hazing, because of all the habituation that's happened from someone driving down the street and looking at it, or yelling one time, because that's just not enough. Coyotes, when they are wild animals and they have a limited amount of caloric energy that they want to give out every day. And so if they don't have to run out of a neighborhood because they don't perceive it a huge threat, they won't. So it's up to us to kind of step that up and really show that it is worth far more for them to leave the area than to stay and deal with our noisy chaos.
Mm-hmm. There was one more addition. Someone said that a friend contacted them about a coyote eating cable, and they wanted to stop the coyote from doing that without harm to the coyote. So I don't know. I think it probably would depend on where the cable is and how that's set up. I don't know. Do coyotes sometimes eat things like that? Oh,
yeah, they do. I just spoke to somebody about a situation like this, about coyote eating cables that were around a military base that I forgot what the cables did. Oh, the cables, I think, were some kind of alarm system. So somebody was climbing the fence or something, and the coyotes were chewing on them. And in that, because since it was miles of cable on a fence, or not miles, a mile of cable on a fence. It was a difficult, we came up with a strategy. It was a long strategy. I won't bore everybody here with tonight, and I'm still have not heard how it's working yet, but they promised to get back to me. So maybe when I have more information, I'll be able to share it in the future. But yeah,
Okay.
that does occasionally happen.
Okay.
I would think like putting PVC pipe around it or making something harder to protect the wire so that they can't chew on it as easily.
Yeah, on short spurts of cable, that would be great. This was a long,
short.
but yeah, I agree. That's a great option for things like that if you're just doing them. And also sometimes irrigation for vineyards and stuff. They'll sometimes chew on the but so will rodents, and even wild turkeys and things like that can peck at those irrigation tubes. So it's not unusual for wildlife to mess with those a little bit. And for those, I often suggest having alternative water sources at the end of vineyard rows, small troughs that are filled with floaties in them. So if other animals get in them, they can escape without drowning. So there's alternatives to all these problems. Sometimes I've even had them anchor nylobones and stuff on the end to encourage chewing on things like that, as opposed to the irrigation cables. So there's inventive solutions you can come up with if you're have an open mind and you're not the type that. And I love that people more and more have open minds about these things. Back in the old days, if I suggest something like that, you'd get laughed out of the place and poo-pooed. And now people are willing to try them and finding out that a lot of times these work. And it's a great solution. Saves them a lot of money from a year-round killing campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I think that's about it. I want to thank everyone, our presenters for coming, and everybody who joined us. We can still keep the conversation going. So if you have further questions, you can contact each of us. Again, we'll be putting this on the Marin Humane YouTube page in the next couple of days, but I hope this was helpful. I always learn a lot and really appreciate it. So thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.